So in this first tutorial, we're going to be looking at how to open up a new document in Scribus, and I'll walk you through all of the procedures to do that. And we'll talk a little bit about setting the page dimensions and margin guides as well, and what you need to think about when you're doing that. So this is what Scribus should look like when you first open it up. If you don't see this new document window, that's okay. You can go to File up here at the top and then New, and that'll bring that up. Don't worry about these two panes yet. They're not important when you're setting up the page. Those are only once you get to editing that they matter. So the first thing you want to do is try to think about what size you want the document. It's going to give you A4 by default. We don't use A4 paper in the United States typically. What we usually use, and I'll scroll down the list here, is letter, which is 8.5 inches by 11 inches, or it's 51 by 66 for using the pica scale. We will also sometimes use legal, which is 11 or 8.5 by 14 inches. So it's the same width as letter paper, but it's a little bit longer. So it's 51 by 84. Those are the dimensions in the pica scale. And then the largest one is either, you'll see it listed either as tabloid or as ledger, and I think it's ledger in this program. It's just an orientation preference on that size. Ledger size paper, tabloid size paper is 11 by 17 or 66 by 102. So I'm walking you through creating something that's a very large format item. It's a box, and what that's going to be printed on is larger format paperboard. So when you are doing something that's bigger than any of those sizes, then you need to go to a custom size, and that's what I'm going to select here. Now, we won't do any projects in class where you have to use a custom size. Almost always you're going to use either letter, legal, or tabloid / ledger, because those are the three most common paper sizes in the United States, and those are the cheapest to purchase. Now, if you're doing something like an industrial application, like a packaging material or something like that, then you can print on larger size paper, and that's what we're doing here for the purposes of this tutorial. But just remember, you're always going to, if you start at A4, you're always going to change it to be one of the three standard American sizes. But we're going to go with custom here. I'm going to make it landscape because that's the layout of our box that I'm showing you how to make. Now, I have a sketch here. Let me pull that up and put it onto the screen. So this is a sketch I made of the box that I'm using as a model for this exercise. So what I've done here is I've measured all of the dimensions, and we're going to talk in a future tutorial about how to perform these measurements. But I know that based on the dimensions of just the box itself, it's going to be this many picas wide and this many picas tall. You add up the size of the flaps, the size of along this crease or fold in the document, and then you just use the same value up here. So in order to accommodate this size box, we're going to need a layout size of at least 102 picas, and then the height we're going to need to make 78. 78 picas is 13 inches. That's about the maximum width that you can get on most high volume commercial printers. But you know, as with everything, there are specialty printers and specialty print shops that will print even larger format stuff. But typically, if you go beyond that, then you have to go to like a plot printer or something that prints off of a roll of paper instead of individual sheets. So now we have our width and height set. We've got the orientation set. It's important to try to get these things correct. You can change them later on, but it creates something of a minor problem. If you have a complicated layout, you'll have to then go back and make some modifications to stuff that you already have on the page, or you have to start over, which is frustrating. So you definitely want to know which orientation you want, and then the width and height of the material that you need. Number of pages we're going to set to 1. We're just doing the one page. that's what you would use if you were producing this commercially as well, because it's a one-sided document, so you only need to create the layout for one page. The other side of a box that you use for paper packaging is just the paperboard. They don't put anything on the inside typically. Although that's not always the case. Sometimes for like promotions and stuff like that, you'll see printing on the inside of a box as well. And in that case, you need two, but we only need one for this. If your default unit is set to inches, you want to make sure that that's changed to picas. That's what we're going to use for every project in this class, and we'll discuss why more in the class. But that's the unit of measurement you want. And I believe you can go into the preferences of Scribus and make sure that this is always set to the default. You can probably set your default paper size as well. Margin guides. We don't need to worry about margin guides on this one because we are using bleeds. So we will use just regular guides to set our margins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set all of these to 0. So I'll click the little link button to link all the values, and then I'll hit 0 on my keyboard and then tab it out, and then once you hit tab, it sets all of the values to the same. If you disconnect this and change one value, like let's say I want to go back to 3p6, it won't change any of the other values. But if you link it, it sets them all at the same value. And I think that's all for getting your document set up. So you can hit OK. And now we've got our document. Up here we can see the ruler, which tells us where we're at on the page. And this is where you drag guides from, which is the next thing we're going to do in the next tutorial. So here, every tick mark on the ruler is approximately, I think, 2 picas, right? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's a little, actually, the scale's a little off. But here, 1 tick is 1 pica. So we're set at 102, and then down here at the very bottom, zoomed in a lot, we're set at 76, or sorry, 78. So we're all good to go. And now we have our page dimensions set. We have a new file open. Let's save it. And so I'm going to click File and Save. And that will open up the Save dialog box. I'm going to navigate over here to, let's see, give me a moment to find my file in Dropbox that I have for examples here. Oh, I have one for 424, 528. That's exactly what I need. Fall, assignment files. Okay, so here's what I'm working out of to create the box, but here's where I'm going to put all the examples that I used in the tutorial. So I'm going to call this one just wafer box or something like that. That works for now. I'm going to hit OK. So what that has done is I've saved the project file. The project file is not the finished file, and it's really important to remember that. So here's my project file for Scribus. It's .sla file extension. This is not what you would send to the printers if you were printing. We're going to learn at the very end of this process how to save and package your files, because you want to send someone who needs to print this a PDF. Because that's the universal de facto file interchange format. The Scribus file only works if you have Scribus installed on your computer. And if you don't package the files correctly at the end of the process, it won't work either. You'll just see a bunch of incorrect text and missing images. So we'll talk about how to package at the very end. But that's all we need to do to get started, and that's the end of this first tutorial.